guys, it's Sam and welcome to my new book room and filming setup. That was a cat just knocking into my tripod. But this is my new book room. I'm still in the process of figuring out like the lighting and the setup and how exactly I want to film everything. But just today, earlier today, I set everything up in here. So if you're watching this recently, like within the next 24 hours, then you can actually go to my Instagram stories and my Instagram live and see me setting everything up. So I will link my Instagram down below as always, and you can check that out if you want to see more like behind the scenes footage. I have some incredibly needy animals right now that are not allowing me to film. It's a little ridiculous. And this is my April wrap up, and April was brought to you by audiobooks because without audiobooks, I wouldn't have read anything in April. I read 3 audiobooks in April and 1 graphic novel, and without those I wouldn't have read anything because I had no chance to read in April due to the move and graduate school and work and internship and everything that I've told you about and how crazy April was. I only got to basically read in the car, and that's it. So God bless audiobooks. The first book that I read in April was Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. This is one of the precursors to our BookTube SFF Awards nominees. So the second book in this series was nominated this year for BookTube SFF Awards, so I had to read this one. This is one of the ones I listened to on audiobook, obviously. And I loved this. This is the first book in an adult science fiction trilogy, and the audiobook has a full cast of characters, and that made it amazing. So there's different speaking parts for all these different people, and it was just all these different narrators. It was so good. So this follows a team that is put together when a part of a giant robot that they figure out very quickly on is possibly extraterrestrial. They are put together in order to find all of the parts for this robot, and everything kind of goes from there. This series is a lot of fun. It is a little bit slower, more character driven than I think a lot of people were expecting. A lot of people were expecting like giant robot fights, blah, 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 and like that's not exactly what this is, but this is a lot about the characters and the inner workings of like groups and group dynamics and kind of these like shady anti-villain type characters. These kinds of antagonists that are like, if you've played Mass Effect, there's a character in here that reminds me a lot of the Elusive Man, and it's just so fun. And I really like the characters and I got really attached to them. There is kind of some distance in a way. This is set up in a similar way to like Illuminae in that it's a case file that's being reviewed. So you have mostly interviews and stuff like that. I don't know how that translates in the actual physical copy because I obviously didn't read the physical copy, but I really liked the way it was done in the audiobook, and it just makes you fly through them. And I think because of that whole like case file format, you feel a little bit of a distance from some of the characters, not all of them, but some of them. And so I didn't rate this quite as high as it could have been, I think due to that reason and the fact that there was times that it sort of meandered a bit, but I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, and I was really looking forward to the sequel, which I'll talk about in a second. Then I read another BookTube SFF Award nominee, and that is My Favorite Thing is Monsters, Volume 1 by Emil Ferris. So this is one of the graphic novel nominees. The art in here is fantastic. I wish I had my copy still, but I got it from the library because then I could show you all the art. It's very pretty, and it's kind of set around the theme of like vintage monster horror films, like these like kind of B-list horror films and movies and stuff. So this is taking place, I believe, in the late 60s, very close to Vietnam, so I'm not good with history and I'm not looking up right this second, but it takes place obviously in the past, and it follows our main character who's, I believe, around like preteen age, and she thinks of herself as a little monster. So she draws herself as this like little kind of like werewolf monster. She's obsessed with monsters, she's obsessed with like horror films and stuff like that, and she ends up kind of following the trail of this case of the death of her upstairs neighbor. And so this is all about this little girl's life and kind of perspective on things, and she ties in these themes of like horror, and there's a lot of commentary about like what makes a monster, and is it still a monster if you love it, and family, and immigration, and like mixing of cultures and stuff like that all mixed into their lives and their culture and their city, and they live in a big city, and kind of how they interact with that and how they are within a community within a big city and all of this stuff. And she feels like she is very unique and separate from everybody, and she's this monster, and she wants to kind of figure out what happened to this upstairs neighbor that she really had a close bond to. There's also some flashback scenes to that neighbor. So she was involved in a lot of things during the Holocaust, and so there's a lot of stuff around her and her Jewish culture and everything like that. So that's probably a very convoluted description because I went into this book not knowing what it was about at all. Like I just knew it was a nominee and that people loved it. So I went into it not knowing what it was about. And I feel like there's not a really concise way to talk about what it's about because it's a very thematic story. It's very much about the art and stuff, and it's not a complete story because there's going to be multiple volumes and it's huge. It's like this big. The thing is a monster in and of itself. So I will warn you, this is a very heavy read. This has a lot of mature content in it. There's like blood and gore and like scarier pictures at times, although I wouldn't consider this like a horror graphic novel. It has like horror elements to it in this kind of like B-list horror drawing way. And there's a lot of themes of like sexual assault or even like torture and stuff like that. So just be careful if you're going into this. Read up on all the trigger warnings. It's very, very heavy material, and there's a lot going on with that, with like some pedophilia, a lot of like sexual triggers. So if you have any triggers involving anything, any sexual themes at all, be warned that that is in there. So I found this book hard to read at times. It wasn't like the hardest thing I've ever read or anything, but it was very dense. The story was fairly meandering. You had a lot of these points of it kind of flashing back into that side character story and then moving forward with the current character story and all of that kind of stuff. So it meandered a bit and you got a little bit lost and you're not really seeing where all the pieces connect. At the end, it really kind of flowed together, but throughout it was just like, okay, what is the point of all this? And I'm sure it'll get tied in later volumes, but I did just find it a little more meandering than I wanted it to be, and I had a hard time kind of connecting to the characters because the character feels so separate because she draws herself as a monster as well. So it was interesting. I don't really know what I expected from it, and I don't really know what to expect from the future of the series, but I do plan on continuing to read it, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I then listened to Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is another BookTube SFF Award nominee for our fantasy category. It's the first book, and I believe an adult fantasy trilogy. I'm not sure if there's gonna be more books than 3. There might be. And I loved this. This follows our main character from late childhood into early adolescence, and she ends up being recruited by a magical boarding school / nunnery convent for magical assassin nuns. It's amazing. Don't let the age range of the main character fool you. This is definitely an adult novel. Mark Lawrence writes grimdark, which means that it's dark, grim, sometimes gory fantasy. This is not YA at all, even though the character is younger. And I'm going to be doing a full review for this coming up on Monday, but I loved this. The audiobook narrator is excellent. She has really excellent voices and everything for all the characters, and this is a very female-dominated series and book. So the most of it takes place within this convent, and there's all of these really amazing characters. There's a lot of her fellow students, so if you like the boarding school kind of Name of the Wind feel to your stories, that is what this is as far as like the setting and where she is and the convent and everything and all those characters and all the things that they get into as kids and just as kids who have like kind of messed up backgrounds due to the nature of this world. And then you have all of these teachers or all of these nuns who are teaching all of these classes. So you have all of that like Harry Potter Name of the Wind kind of feels to it, even though it's a very, very different story than that. They are magical lady assassin nuns. It is so cool. And there's some things that they kind of tripped over as far as the like world building at times as far as the magic system. The magic system isn't one that is very well explained, and I don't really think it needs to be. It's one of those magic systems that's just like, this is how it works and I accept that. But if you are somebody who really likes your technical magical systems, you might not like it as much. I was totally fine. I was like, whatever you want to tell me, man, I'll accept it because this is amazing. It is very character focused, but they also are building the foundation for the rest of the series. There's a lot of political machinations and stuff happening as well. And there is some flash forward points where you get to kind of see what's happening with some of them as adults. And that just like whets your appetite for the rest of the series. I cannot wait for the rest of the series. I plan on listening to the rest of it on audiobook, I think, because I love the audiobook narrator. But it was so, so good. One of my new favorite series. I gave Red Sister 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm thinking of bumping up to a 5 because I'm still thinking about it and obsessing about it. So it may get bumped up to a 5 ultimately because it's sort of a 5 in my heart. But there was a couple missteps. But overall, it's so good. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a full review and gush, obviously, for this book on Monday if you're interested in more of my thoughts. And lastly, like I teased earlier, I listened to Waking Gods by Sylvain Duval. This is the second book in the Themis Files, which Sleeping Giants was the first book in that series. And again, listen to the audiobook. I don't have much new to say about it. It was continuing on, really good story. I didn't like it better or worse than the first book in the series. I think it continued on. There's a little bit more action happening in this one just due to the nature of everything everything that's going on, but ultimately still a slower kind of pace to this kind of science fiction story. This is not a fast-paced, action-y science fiction, although there's stuff that does happen. It's mostly focused around these characters and the consequences of these characters' actions throughout the series and how their relationships and their dynamics like work and everything. So I, again, ended up really enjoying this, and this is one of our nominees, again, for the BookTube SFF Awards, so you get to hear more of my thoughts during the award show, which is coming up next month, which is crazy because it feels like we've been doing this for so long, but we haven't, and it's here and Anyway, I really enjoyed this one, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This series so far for me is really good. A 4 out of 5 star series. I'm highly, highly enjoying it. And I would love to see these books as movies because they read like movies for the audiobook. So if they made these into films, I would be so excited. So that is it for my reading in April. Comment down below, let me know how your reading month went in April. Are you like me and barely read anything? I'm ready to get back on that reading horse for the rest of the summer because now my life is starting to slowly calm down bit by bit. My internship is over the end of this month, and then classes are, like, I'm fully done with my master's degree the end of August, so like, it's coming. It's coming. I can get back to reading like 8 to 12 books a month, hopefully, in like the fall. But even for right now, I'm hoping to be able to read a little more than I did in April, but I'm still very happy with the things that I read. Overall, really good reading month. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all you guys soon. Bye!